Lecture 6, Inserting and Handling Objects. So we're again getting more into the nitty-gritty of the actually doing, the using these different tools. And so we're going to look at images, tables, captions, and alt text, and make sure that you're using them properly and putting them properly, using all of the kind of techniques and being aware of a couple key things that you need to know for each of these. So this is our third learning objective for Module 2. And we'll start out with images. So we need pictures, right? So we all know that like there's different learning preferences, but then also sometimes when you're creating something, you actually need to show a visual. So in a paper for an assignment, it could be a picture of some community that you're researching and you needed to show some part of their culture. When you're in work, it could be the images, right? You could be designing a logo for somebody. And so you need to be able to put that into the document and explain why you did all of these certain things, why it's that color, why it's that size, whatever. So we need images. They're important, but they start to get really tricky when you're using them. So you want to make sure that when you're using images, you actually do need them. So don't just have pictures for picture's sake, but use them when they're going to provide something additional. They're going to give extra information. And so once you've decided that you do need to have the picture, it's important that you insert it properly. So insert in both Google Docs and Word, and then picture. And so you can, sometimes there's different types of pictures that you can insert, but it's always going to be similar to this for like the actual mechanism of adding it. And so this is significantly better than just copying and pasting an image in, which you can do now, but a lot of times the quality of the image will be degraded, or sometimes that image isn't actually saved wherever you're putting it because this is a little bit beyond my understanding, but it's like in your memory maybe on the computer. And so when you paste it in, it's not actually completely saved in that file. And so that happens more when you're working on documents that are saved in the cloud, in my experience. And so once you insert it properly, there's different formattings for text wrapping. And so that's what this inline with text refers to. We're going to go into some more detail on that. But so when you resize, make sure you're doing it properly. So you want to kind of hold the proportions so you don't end up with a distorted image. And so this is just a quick screenshot for both Word and Docs for how you would go about inserting a picture. And like I mentioned, there's different types of pictures. You can see that here, stock images online from your browser. So pretty consistent across these two. And then you have your text wrapping or your image alignment options. And so I've put a bunch of them up on the screen. We don't necessarily need to spend a lot of time going into detail on them, me telling you about them, but you should be aware of them. You'll see all the different options. When you, like, particularly in Word, it's really easy to visualize this. It sits up in the styles pane, the ribbon at the top of your document, and you can kind of just flip through all of them and see what it looks like for your text. So inline with text is probably going to be the most commonly used, and it basically is just like another word in your line. So it stays on the same line. If the image is really big, then you're going to end up with a lot of white space there. So you could also have it like tight. So it's wrapped around the actual outline of your image. You can do top and bottom. So there's text above, image, text below, or behind text or in front of text. And so sometimes you might use that like for a watermark. So if you're kind of claiming something, it's like proprietary information. Using an image behind text can be useful for that. So these are just all the different types of formats that you might have. They all have their purposes. They belong in different sorts of instances. Most of the time, probably in line with text or maybe square or tight are going to be what are going to be most useful for you. And so one of the trickiest things with images is the movement. They will get in and get really wonky, and just like depending on if you have a lot of text coming around them or if you've added the images before or after you're finished typing, just all these different things can sometimes make it move around more than you would want it to. And so you can lock it. So it's a little bit small here, but the arrow is pointing to the anchor for the image. So you could do that if you don't want it to move, but really it's, again, about how you're inserting and being intentional with the placement. So that's your images. Now tables. And tables are something that we use all the time, right? So it can be for presenting data, like if you're in a stats class or econ, there's going to be numbers probably that will fit well in a table, but also you could use it for organizing or scheduling. There's so many different purposes for using a table. And so with that, it's important that, again, you go to insert and table. Once you have it, avoid merging your cells. And so merging cells within a table sometimes can make it look prettier when you're just viewing it and thinking about it from that perspective, but it impacts the ability of screen readers to understand what's in the table, because the table is supposed to have a particular structure where you have columns, you have rows, kind of it's read in our left to right kind of format, top to bottom. And merging can make that trickier for the machine to understand. So you're not going to be able to communicate the information in the same way if you have lots of merged cells and then somebody is trying to access that information while using a screen reader. With tables, it's important to have headers. Again, for screen readers, it makes it quite easier for them to interpret the information. But again, this is more of just like a kind of guiding how somebody takes in the information. If there's clear headings, it's going to make them track the information in the way that you want them to a little bit more clearly. So this is just screenshots of how you would insert a table. With Word, you'd go in and actually select, like using the numbers, how many rows and how many columns you want. On Google Docs, you can drag it. So each box, makes it larger as you go. There is a limit, I think, still with creating a table through this method on Google Docs, where I think it only lets it be 12 or maybe 10 by 10. And you don't have that within Word, or at least I haven't gotten to a point where it's tried to restrict the size. So that's another thing where Word can do a little bit more than Google Docs. So moving on from tables, then we have captions. And here you want to use Word, essentially. So if you're doing something that's very image heavy, I think Word is probably going to be the better choice for you in any instance, really, that I can think of. And so you would right click and go to insert caption. And one of the really great benefits of this as well is when you do this using the proper techniques to add the caption, the styles, it will automatically add into your table of figures. So you have your table of contents, and that's for like the word content of your paper, but your figures would also track any of the images that you have, tables, all of those sorts of things. And those will show up in a contents at the beginning of the paper. So again, when you're doing a longer document, it's really nice to have that, and putting the captions in for your images will help that automatically update as you go. So keeping track of page numbers, for example, will be so much easier when you have it formatted properly there. And then we have alt text. And so this is, I'm sure, a term that you have heard a lot, but maybe haven't actually created yourself yet. So it's a written description that explains basically what is being communicated in an image that's being presented. And it also will appear in place of the image if for some reason the image doesn't load. So it's an important thing to kind of be aware of. It's really essential for accessibility, making sure that your documents are meeting kind of basic standards. It describes the content of the image, but it doesn't say this is a picture of. We know it's a picture, right? The screen reading software will understand that it's an image when it's looking at it, and that's why it's looking for alt text. And so it should convey the important information that that image or table is there to convey. So some short piece of text that can communicate the essential pieces. And so here I have some screenshots of how you would add in the alt text, and then an example of what could be okay alt text. This communication and best languages, best choices for alt text is kind of something that, in my experience, is always evolving, like how we can better describe things. So this example is fine, but you might be able to do it better, basically. So we have this picture of NSYNC. Again, I apologize for being such a millennial. So we say it's 5 men in black clothing posing together and smiling at the camera. So that's essentially what it is conveying. You could also maybe add it's behind a stylized NSYNC logo for the band. That might be a better caption, better alt text here. But so this is something where you want to actually look at the image and what you want the person who's reading this to be able to take from it. But it is important that you include it. And so our key takeaways here are that all of these additions are great, but you want to make sure you really do need them and they're serving a purpose and that they're put in intentionally. And so when you're doing that, you want to pay attention to the alignment, see how it fits within the text. Again, the purpose is really key. You want to make sure that it is actually essential. Sometimes I think there's an instinct almost to add things because it feels like something's better if it has more different things. So a paper would be better if it has lots of images or tables or whatever, but actually if the images aren't really presenting anything to add to your argument, probably you don't need them. So just being different or having more variety isn't always the goal. You want to make sure that they really are serving a purpose. And then with all of that, you want to make sure that they remain accessible. So you want to make sure that there's no barriers to somebody being able to take in all of the information that you're trying to present in your document. So some of this, I'm sure, is information you're already familiar with, but maybe some of it's new, or maybe some of just like the application is new to you. So hopefully this is clear. Any questions, as usual, let me know.